I'm Cassie, and I'll be your presenter today. My topic is an introduction to writing a literature review. This workshop may be especially helpful for graduate students. Here's a brief overview of the components of this workshop. First, we'll define literature reviews as a writing genre typical in many disciplines. Then we'll examine the common writing conventions and rhetorical moves of literature reviews. Then we'll discuss strategies for getting started. Finally, we'll consider organization. Literature reviews are typically part of a larger project, such as a research paper, article, book, thesis, or dissertation. This workshop focuses on literature reviews as part of a larger project, but you may be also assigned to write a standalone literature review. A literature review has two related purposes. First, to evaluate existing research related to your topic, and second, to position your argument within the existing research. A common misconception of a literature review, likely due to the term review, is that it is simply a summary of existing research. Literature reviews are not contextualized summaries of potential sources. Instead, they show the relationships between existing research and your project. Now we'll look at some common rhetorical moves of a literature review across disciplines. Synthesizing sources, identifying a gap, and positioning your argument. Let's look at an example passage of a literature review that synthesizes sources. Remember that earlier I defined one of the purposes for literature reviews as an evaluation of existing research related to your topic. I also emphasized that literature reviews are not decontextualized summaries of individual sources. Instead, they show the relationships between the existing research and your project. This literature review passage is on the topic of graduate education. The different colors represent different individual sources. The underlined phrases show how the author synthesized the multiple sources into shared concepts. The author shapes these individual sources to create new meaning through showing relationships. Remember, synthesis means putting your sources in conversation with one another instead of considering them as isolated theories or research. Next, identifying a gap. In addition to identifying and articulating the ongoing scholarly conversation through synthesis of sources, you will make an argument about where your research fits into your field. We call this rhetorical move identifying a gap. When you identify the gap that your research will fill, you show the relationship between the existing research and your project. You are making an argument that research still needs to be done. You may use language such as, while several studies have addressed blank, this study focuses on blank with attention to blank. Finally, you will clearly position the argument of your project within the existing research. You may identify the research questions you intend to take up and which research themes are most relevant for your project. Next, we'll talk about some strategies for getting started based on where you are in your research writing process. Getting started on organizing and synthesizing my sources. You will likely need an organization system for your sources. Your goal is to begin mapping out similarities and differences, evaluating, dividing into themes, theoretical positions, methodologies, and/or debates. Before you begin reading, determine an evaluation strategy. Ask similar questions of all your sources. Your discipline's expectations and conventions will likely determine how you evaluate sources. But methods, argument, date, credibility, and relevance are common evaluative categories that you can compare across sources. One common way to organize and evaluate is to create an annotated bibliography. with a citation, summary, and explanation of its relationship to other sources in your project. Here I'm showing an example summary with key phrases color-coded. Another organization strategy is a chart or double-entry notebook. The source information is on the left with a summary, and reflections and connections are on the right. Again, the themes here are color-coded. Another option is to use citation management software such as EndNote or Zotero. Both will allow you to organize your sources. You can sort, tag, and create summaries of your sources in a library. If used correctly and consistently, software like these can make citation much easier throughout your research writing process. Writing, organizing, and reorganizing as you read and encounter sources will make drafting your literature review much easier. Brainstorming for articulating the gap and positioning your argument. Here are some questions to help you begin brainstorming when you are ready to articulate the gap in current research and position your argument. You will likely need to have a good grasp of most of the existing literature before you can identify the gap your research fills. You may ask yourself, does my project extend the current research? Does it challenge or question the existing research? Does it pull together two or more previously unconnected threads? Does it apply or forward the research in a new context? You will want to have a clear sense of your initial research questions and how they developed. Then you can answer the how question. How does your research intend to fill the gap? Why is this important to know? Now let's look at the organization of a final draft of a literature review. Remember that your discipline's expectations might determine some of the choices that you make here. In your introduction, you will define the overall topic or issue. You should point out the overall trends or themes you identified through your evaluation and synthesis activities. Finally, you will establish your position or argument and provide your audience a roadmap to the body paragraphs. You want to preview the body paragraphs. In your body paragraphs, consider how you organized and synthesized your sources. You will present a synthesis of your sources based around one organizational strategy. Those strategies could be thematic, methodological, chronological, argument-based, or theory-based. You will likely need to include all relevant sources, but spend the most time on the ones that have the most significance to your project. Finally, in your conclusion, you will identify the gap in current research and restate your argument from the introduction. You will make an argument for why and how your research is viable in relation to the work already done. Let's sum up what we talked about today. First, we defined a literature review as a writing genre typical in many disciplines. A literature review positions your research within the ongoing scholarly conversation by synthesizing and evaluating the literature. Then we examined the common writing conventions and rhetorical moves of a literature review. We looked at synthesis, identifying a gap, and positioning your argument. Then we discussed strategies for getting started, depending on where you are in your process. It's important to organize your sources, write as you read, and write out clear answers to how your research relates to the ongoing conversation. Finally, we considered the organization expectations. Literature reviews have an introduction, body, and conclusion. Thank you for your participation and for listening to this workshop from the University Writing Center.